Back to Deep Thoughts, ladies and gentlemen, on this very nice afternoon in Southern California. So today I'm going to attempt to talk about the soul. I'm smoking this really bizarre Perdomo cigar, which I don't know if I've ever smoked before. Heard about it. My buddy smoked this. I usually don't. So the soul. How can you even have a conversation about the soul, let alone dialogue by yourself for 1 hour or more? Well, if you've watched every single show of Deep Thoughts, you know that we've touched on the soul several times. Some episodes, quite a bit. What's interesting about it for me is that you know, when you say soul, you immediately, depending on how much you've thought about the subject, you'll immediately bump into people or have the thought yourself of Christianity or whatever respective religion that you worship. Christianity usually is the one that, especially in America, obviously, that there's been a lot of fictional stories written around Christianity that talk about the soul, right? You know, it's the whole story of Faust selling his soul to the devil and that sort of thing, right? And so because we have so much, fictional content around Christianity with souls, it tends to connect. I mean, you get me, right? Okay. What I have found is the longer that I have mulled over this thing, soul, spirit's the other word. Again, I've said in episodes 2 years ago that I was going to use spirit and not soul because it is more generic to the concept and doesn't attach itself to other paradigms. But in this particular one, I'm going to say soul, because I think it'll make a better title for the episode, and it'll help orient people to the episode in general, right? When you start developing a scientific approach, meaning non-religious approach towards the idea that we are symbiotic creatures, like Jadzia Dax from Deep Space Nine, that we have this spiritual configuration of some sort of force, some sort of energy. Maybe it doesn't have any force. And then you have your body. And then the mezzanine between the two that we always talk about, and Buddhist monks talk about this, Hindu gurus talk about this. This is nothing new. I'm offering no insight into this. I'm just reminding you that they have classified the mind as this sort of, again, the joining point between your body and your soul. You can take drugs and mess with your mind, right? You can drink too much and not be able to walk across the room. What the hell was that? You can take acid and have a trip, right? But what I want to encourage you to start doing with your life is to, if you believe in a soul, then you can jump right in and it won't be speculative. If you think, you're full of shit, there's no soul, you die, you're dust, that's it. If you're coming at it from a scientific standpoint that takes the latter opinion, then do me this little favor. I want you on a day-to-day basis, moment-by-moment basis, almost second by second, if not split second by split second, study the various layers of your consciousness. And what does that mean? Well, if I burned you with a lighter, you know that that's your body dimension. If I betray you as a friend, I have hit your mind. But I may have also, when someone passes away, let's just say, it goes down to your soul. It gets deep. And you may blow that all off. You may go the Kurzweil bag of chemicals route. Okay. There is an experiment, and it was told to me as Aristotle's experiment. I think that these things get passed down and they get romanticized, but it doesn't matter. You can do this, and it's phenomenal. Don't do this if you're driving. And the experiment was to create this pluralistic universe from an atomistic universe. There used to be this time, and it's only written down, and it's when we look at the rituals of man, we think we see atomistic rituals, which is to say that the spiritual realm and the body realm were all one. It was as if there was no transformation for man to have dialogue about the spiritual realm versus this realm. They have the was it the Day of the Dead in Mexico, right? The celebration of all the relatives that have passed, and it's a very finite moment around Halloween that they pull out of the archives of their history, this ritual, and then they put it back inside most of the year. Now they have little trinkets and stuff that pay homage to this phase all throughout the year, just like someone might have a little pumpkin in their house from the pagan side of things. By the way, if you hear nails pounding and stuff, it's because my neighbor across the street is getting the roof replaced. Special roof episode. But this story came to me, which was this. You're supposed to close your eyes and envision a perfect circle. And once you see that, you then open your eyes and someone gives you a writing utensil and says, now, write down on a piece of paper a perfect circle. And when you can't, you now know the difference between this realm and the heavenly realm. In the heavenly realm, one can conceive of in your mind a perfect circle, perfect cube, perfect anything. But in this world, it is exceptionally difficult to render the perfection of heaven on earth. So that divided up the two. It made people understand you can't fully access this spiritual realm that you can envision just by closing your eyes. Later, several thousand years later, we had man create a fake narrative that their creator has outsourced salvation to only a few men in the Vatican. And apparently you have to do a number of explicit favors for these Catholic priests to get saved. But what I've noticed is, in my own realm of taking the soul and taking all the religion out of it and just letting it be a logical organ of my existence, right? Every moment of a day can be parsed in the symbiotic manner, where I say, what am I feeling right now? Because I don't know about you, but I live inside the chamber of my mind. My consciousness, my mind's eye, as they say, is right where my pineal gland is, and that's where my consciousness exists. These eyeballs are very interesting, but I feel a conduit within my head. I do. Yes, I do have, obviously, sensors that definitely tell me I've stubbed my toe. But isn't it strange how we still feel that our bodies are fairly alienated from our being? I'll give you an example that nearly every single one of you have done and probably do on a daily basis. Maybe not every night. But when you crawl under the sheets in your bed, especially in the wintertime, or if you have a colder room at night, you start to feel the fact that your body is a fairly large object, right? Your feet go all the way down, depending on how big you are, goes all the way down to the bottom of your bed. And if you get overheated, what do? You stick a leg out from under the sheet to create a radiator to radiate the heat out of your calf or whatever it is until you kind of cool off, and then you pull it back in. And oh my God, it's all toasty warm in there, and you just keep kind of going back and forth. Anytime you were a little kid and you created a fort, but it wasn't big enough for your whole body, or you put your head inside of a box, and all of a sudden you've got this kind of virtual reality made of cardboard around your head, and it was a different world. But your feet are hanging outside this box, but you could give a shit about your feet. It's a weird thing. How many of you can be in the cold as long as you keep your upper torso warm? Your legs can be out there in the snow, and it seems like it doesn't matter. It seems like it's a whole separate jurisdiction of responsibility, and your brain's really, almost just barely responsible for its autonomic blood supply. That's about it. You probably understand what I'm saying here. We adopt a paradigm when we're young that we are the total sum of our body, the five senses, and we sort of walk around carrying that around. But in the end, I think on a second-to-second basis, you are feeling and parsing yourself into little tiny pieces, little areas. You do know the difference between a smell and a taste, a feeling, hearing something versus seeing something. You understand the difference, but you also understand the beautiful marriage of all these senses coming together. You do. And that's the first step. If I were to teach a class on this in a college, I would spend, first 2 weeks creating experiments and examples by which the students understand that they already subliminally understand that there are different pieces of consciousness that they interact with every second of every day. And hey, when you go to the movie theater, your sense of touch and sense of smell go secondary to your sense of sight and sound. Now if someone brings up a big nice butter popcorn or opens up those Twizzlers or Red Vines, you're definitely going to get the sense of smell, and it all combines into this nostalgia, this pattern recognition of a good time. So later on, when you bring this shit home, you smell and taste and hear all that same stuff, you start to feel kind of like you're at the movie theater, but not quite. I dearly hope that theaters rebound, and I'm working on something that might make another sector of life rebound, but won't say anything until we get it rolling. Now, it took me several serendipitous decades to get to the point where I could really start to recognize in my 40s that I do believe that I can sense completely not only my soul, and I'll give you the criteria of what makes me believe it's my soul versus my body or any bag of chemicals. But the other one is my connection to the universe once I found it. It was almost as if I found the, I've been roaming around the world. It's apocalyptic. Everybody's dead. I'm the only one on planet Earth, and I find a terminal. And the terminal was sort of like my soul. And the more I put data in and search data out, it's going to some make-believe database in the universe. There's no power hook to it. I don't know how this damn thing's working. It seems like that's the connection to the universe, right? Yes, very obscure example. Here's my criteria, my personal criteria for what I believe to be my soul. It feels pure, and it feels 100% mature. It seems to be the quiet voice inside me that brings me solutions. On a rare occasion, it'll bring me a rhetorical question. Sort of like that, now why did you do that? Or you should do this. It seems as if it's almost an elder of infinite wisdom within me. And the frustrating part is that I feel like it is me, not being John Malkovich with 10 people living inside my head, some guy obsessed with his spunk. And when I act like, well, I'll put it this way, when I act in any manner of which I regret, and for me it's the subtleties of behavior here and there, I'm like, God, I probably should have been more reserved there, or I should have been more caring, or whatever. It's that voice, it's that feeling. It's not really a voice, but it's just a feeling that has sort of telepathy thought processes. I keep getting a gestalt of an emotion, which is a full, they say a picture's worth 1,000 words, where the word gestalt is if you take that picture and turn it into a giant information packet, however many words a picture's worth, infinite, 10,000, whatever, you call that the gestalt. It comes into you as a pattern of like something you can create a differential image of. So you have a feeling, which is a bunch of pieces of information built on everything you take in, your history, your 5 senses, maybe some 6 senses, 7th, whatever. And then you take the gestalt from your soul, which is the exact amount of information, and you slam them together, And whatever is left after the cancellation either adds or subtracts from the pattern. That is where I make my judgment as to whether or not I'm happy with my behavior or not so happy with my behavior. Sometimes it's just neutral. Oh, well, I guess I could have done that, but I just chose the other thing. No hard feelings, right? There's the old saying, stop and smell the flowers, right? All right. I want you to attempt, and don't obsess, of course, but attempt to feel what you really feel and try to give it some sort of three-dimensional space model if you can. Meaning, the Asians, for instance, are very sensitive to this, and they always ask you, what's your gut feeling? They recognize as an entire culture that your gut is where a lot of information is stored, your intuitive gut, and they map it to various glands up the spine of your body. And I think that's beautiful. One of the ways you can really feel your consciousness and how it behaves way outside of any cellular tissue that you happen to be borrowing from the universe at that one particular time is deprive yourself of sleep. What does that mean? Just stay up really late once. You can fake this by getting up too early and trying to stay awake. Let's just say you're like, man, I never can get up at 5 o'clock. Well, get up at 5 o'clock, stay in bed, and stare at the ceiling, even if it's black in the bedroom, and just try to keep your eyes open, but get yourself comfortable at the same time so your body's fighting your will to stay awake. And at that point, start to realize and start to feel the physical three-dimensional consciousness that you have. You're probably not worried about the tip of your toes, but you're going to feel this. If you're like me, you will literally feel some level of consciousness almost falling out of your head into the mattress. And at times when you fall asleep, you will virtually feel like your soul has fallen off a cliff, and it'll do like these dives, but then it comes back. It's like, woo! Oh my gosh, you're so awake and eventually you'll lose the ability to stay awake. It's a beautiful thing. There's also just a very basic thing you can do is anytime you've had your emotional state significantly changed, either for the negative or for the positive, there's a weird, almost what I like to call like the saran wrap moment, where reality that is very three-dimensional and something you can experience sort of shrinks, and it comes around you, and it becomes very tight for that moment, and you're either in glee or you're in horror, and that is when you feel much different about who you are as a being. It's almost as if you're going through such a moment of trauma that your soul goes, I am going to show up a lot more intensely than I have in the past to help you deal with this. Either you won the lottery and you've got $120 million waiting for you just to make the phone call, and you're like, wow, all that pain, all that suffering is gone. Oh my gosh, I now can travel the world, write that movie, write that book, get that girl, get that guy, have 10 kids, whatever it is. It's just the pain of life just went, whoa, right? And then there's the other half, which is somebody broke up with you, or you lost your job, or my gosh, Hillary Clinton didn't get elected. Or you're potentially about to get injured. You're in a car wreck, and time slows down when the car wreck happens. And I think that's very interesting that somehow through just and again, you could blame it on adrenaline, but I will tell you this much. Adrenaline is not an airbag. An airbag, what does it do? It pops in a fraction of a second. That's why it breaks your fucking nose and burns you up and can break a rib, and they're really brutal depending on how you impact them, right? Luckily, I've never had this happen to me personally, but I just had a conversation with a buddy of mine today who had a very close friend of his get severely injured by an airbag. And the sad part was the impact wasn't that big, but the airbag did most of the damage on his body. But it's it's the trade-off we have, right? But adrenaline cannot, in my opinion, and all the studies that I've done on neural chemistry, it can't dump in and within 500 milliseconds give you this amazing rush and slow down time. Because for time to slow down for you, what that means is that your processor got really fast. And it's over cranking the camera, meaning instead of being 30 frames a second, it's now doing 60 to 100 frames a second. So everything for you starts slowing down. And what's very interesting, if you've ever been in a situation of a car wreck, and I've been in a couple of these, you actually have, for relative to the speed that you're going, it's as if you don't really speed up. Your brain can look around inside this accelerated, I should say actually slowed down, overcranked camera phase, and you can think completely normal. I had a kid once, I was 18, I had my own car, I bought one. I'm driving home from work about 11:30 at night. Some dipshit in front of me was stopped on the fucking highway. Here comes a kid behind me, 18, test driving a car, having just totaled one 6 months earlier. I've told the story once. But he hits me, right? He hits me. He raced me on a pass, which was what got everything messed up. And it's a really windy road called the 118, which is very dangerous in California. No visibility. Cars were coming. So for some goddamn reason, at like 11 o'clock at night, there was just seemed to be a bunch of cars out there. So I probably should have slowed down and let him go past me, but I was already way past him. And so he was just sitting in my fucking blind spot. And I'm 18, my skills are relatively good, but I go around him, I slow down, I don't hit the car in front of me at all, and this kid's lost complete control because he's all into his bullshit. Meanwhile, the guy that owns the car is in the passenger seat watching him total this car. But he starts losing control, hits my rear left quarter panel, and I'm not quite sure what part of the car it was, but he flies across the highway, which is a 2-lane highway with orchards. And the orange orchards. And the orchards have about a 1.5 foot bank of dirt before you actually get into the orchard. I believe it's for irrigation damming. Anyway, hits this thing, and that sends the car up in the air, right? So I'm now looking to my left. I'm going normal. He's barely bumped into me, but he did screw up my back bumper. And I'm watching him in slow motion roll this car over on its top. It's a 1976 Dodge Challenger. Lands on the top. But I'm watching, he hit this dirt. And so the dirt's big clods of dirt are coming off in front, just like a Hollywood scene. But I remember I'm thinking completely normal. It's almost as if I just went into a time capsule and I'm going really, really fast. But I don't feel like I'm moving quickly at all. Buddy of mine I lived with at the time had a head-on collision at a intersection, nothing serious, but he was probably going about 20. But he came home and said, my God, time slowed down. And I'm looking at him like, this just happened to me. And he said, the hood just crunched right in front of me really, really slowly. So this has happened to multiple people. Those experiences, and of course there could be plenty of neural explanations for why the brain can suddenly, in a state of hysteria, speed up, right? But again, in terms of my personal research, and it's not as deep as people with PhDs in it, of course, but to dump a chemical cocktail in the brain and get it to respond within a millisecond is pretty phenomenal. Because this kid was probably in the air no longer than Michael Jordan, But I'll tell you, it felt like 3 or 4 seconds to me. These are the unique moments in our existence where we can start feeling the difference, feeling a 3D space, a three-dimensional disconnection with the body. Now, again, Kurzweil could come in and go, that's just an illusion created by the neurons in your brain, giving you a sort of more a cloud sense of your existence. I think because there's so much data, once you start paying attention to these unique moments, you'll start to realize there are dozens and dozens of moments that you've lived with your entire life that seem out of body. There are people who listen to the show who claim to astral project. And again, most people are full of shit when they say that, as I've said in comments. because they never have any decent examples, right? If you astral project, okay, come to my house. What's on my bed? What's in my office? I'm going to put a little trinket out on the coffee table. You're really traveling the universe? Well, come over to my place, especially if you know where it is. Tell me what I got there. Tell me. Never anything like that. They just want the accolade that they're fucking, aliens or whatever. The reason why I bust people's balls who make these claims is that in order to get to the truth with a capital T, we've got to get rid of the bullshit with a capital B. These fuckers that come in and essentially, for their own ego, they're disinfoing the entire group, the entire room, to pay attention to a bunch of shit that doesn't matter, that never really happens, that never has any clinical proof that it happens. If I said that I left my body at night, I would go figure out something, where the fuck are these, bankers? I'd figure out something that we can use, right? Near-death experiences. What's interesting about scientists, about near-death experiences, because I'm gonna come at this the opposite direction, right? When I say near-death experiences, almost all of you have ever heard a story. You could write down right now before I say it what you think I'm going to say, and you're probably 95% correct. So let's come at it from the opposite direction. For those of you who are sick and tired of pop science, this is for you, baby. Scientists come in and they'll say, well, people say they see tunnels of light, if nothing else, light when they die. And they have created this complete bullshit theory. All right? Just a guess. Hats off to them for guessing. But what does a scientist try to do when anything gets outside of their ability to put everything in a fucking box or in a nutshell? They want it back in the nutshell. They want their total lack of dedication to science in general and reality to be just enough for all of us, right? Yes, there's an ice cream truck that comes through the neighborhood. I live in an awesome place, let me just tell you. But they'll try to say that there's a collection of chemicals that dislodge from the brain during death. And they've arbitrarily claimed that these chemicals will somehow splash on the visual cortex, giving it full charge to give you a full RGB light that is white. And they'll say that any state of euphoria that you feel is merely your brain trying to create some sort of sedative for what your brain understands as a traumatic moment of death. Seriously. What I find interesting about nerds, God bless them, I've been one, I've managed them, I've worked beside them, even if I didn't manage them, is that they end up feeling very insignificant in the world because the world itself ignores them. And this is where we get sociopaths, this is where we get crazy people that want to watch the world fucking burn to the ground. Somehow the world didn't give them enough. And so when you feel insignificant, what do you try to do? You try to do the opposite. You try to be significant. On the non-nerdy world, you've got people claiming a bunch of shit that they can't remotely prove to you because it's fictitious. Astral projection claims, right? So on one side we got the hippie lies. On the other side we got the pop science lies. Pop science lies says, hey, before you had this theory I couldn't define, I had complete control and jurisdiction over your brain in this particular area because, hey, look at my memorize and repeat certificate I got here, called a degree. There has to be a group in the middle, which is hopefully us, that says we don't pass out trophies. We don't have degrees. What we want to have are great conversations where we think. We actually think, and we're very, very careful about any conclusive theories that don't have plenty of doors to continue the theory or dismiss the theory. Now, sure, I'll make an episode and I'll tell you gravity's ethereal winds. God damn it, that's what it is. In my brain, I can see it in 3D 100%. And I can see the macro to the micro. It all completely just clicks. It's just beautiful. And considering that I've spent 30 years trying to use the phenomenon model to explain gravity. It's interesting. There's some kid that's banned. I banned him off the YouTube comments. He's unaware that he's banned. He just writes all these goddamn comments, and I can only see him in this one little portal where I can see the comments of a banned person. But this kid is, my God, he's got Neil deGrasse Tyson's, skid marks all over his nose, and he thinks Bill Nye is a fucking genius. Unbelievable, this guy. But in reality, he wants to live in the Wikipedia definition of gravity, which is in the first sentence, the word phenomenon is the very basis of what they've got out there. All right. Well, when it comes to spiritual science, we don't have any. Right? Go to a church, and they will tell you, just have faith, it's there. Then you go off to the science realm, and they simply say it doesn't exist, and you're a fool for thinking otherwise. Well, neither one of those disciplines are ever going to get you to do what I've just explained in the first 30 minutes of this episode, which is chill out, slow down, and realize you do not feel, guarantee you, I don't care who you are, you do not feel like you are one entity right now, wherever you're sitting. You can feel you are this weird amalgamation of a bunch of things. All right? If you're not driving your car, reach out, one of your hands, as far as you can, and then touch something with the tip of your finger. And tell me you think that feels like that's inside your brain. Anytime you have a head cold, it's the biggest pain in the ass. Or you got a toothache or something like that, right? Any pain that's in the cranium region of your body, it's the most debilitating, isn't it? Because your brain is trying to liaison, in my opinion, with this higher consciousness, your soul, your spirit. And when your brain and your body, especially your head, is experiencing pain, pain is only the proprietary classification of a certain type of energy that comes from all your pain sensors in your body. But it also relies tremendously on electricity to report itself in. So if you've got a pinched nerve somewhere, it is debilitating as it could possibly be. I got a buddy of mine that had some surgery for a hernia, and the doctor fucked up, and when he put staples into his hernia, the wall of his stomach, he accidentally pinched a nerve. And my buddy spent nearly a year with this horrible, horrible pain that not only, and the problem with nerve pain obviously is, you could have a staple in your gut, but you're feeling it down the backside of your leg or up your ass crack or whatever, right? So it doesn't report exactly where it's pinched. But it nearly destroyed his life. It almost destroyed his marriage. He was definitely very cross with his child. And he eventually found the number one nerve specialist in America. The guy went in and said, "This asshole stapled one of your nerves. I'm going to undo this." And it was nearly an outpatient surgery, he was reborn. And this is an extremely brilliant human being. So in terms of him dealing with the pain, he tried to deal with it. And then eventually when he was reborn, he had to go to his wife and his kid and say, "I am so sorry I have been this monster. But you have no idea what it was like to have this constant artery of pain going into my brain. It was short-circuiting my ability to be a loving person, to even feel like I was a person." It made him nearly feral, But when you don't have something like that, well, I should say this. If you ever vacillated between the two, you have some condition, you pass a gallstone every once in a while, you pass a kidney stone every once in a while, something else that reports in, you throw out your neck, you throw out your back. Don't you feel like you're reborn when it's all over? And for young people, eat right and exercise. Otherwise, you will sadly learn this lesson that most of us would never wish on anyone. But okay, so I've massaged your brain a little bit on how to take inventory of who you are as a person. Again, it's three-dimensional space. Where do you feel like you are with any one sense that you have. But the intellectual side of it is, I want you to tell me, citing the example I gave way earlier in the episode here, haven't you ever done something and either before you do it, a voice inside you saying, you shouldn't do this, you know that, right? For any of you who've ever been with someone sexually that you shouldn't have been with, perhaps you don't have protection and you're willing to have sex without protection with some random stranger because you're drunk or whatever, or they're just so hot you can't stop yourself. Perhaps you're cheating on a boyfriend, girlfriend, a spouse. Whatever it is, you just told a white lie on the telephone so you could create this space in your life to have this moment. You know there's that little thing inside you that says, you shouldn't be doing this. And the interesting thing is it seems to be pretty damn mature and it just kind of lets you do it. It's like, well, here's the rope, man. Here's more rope. You're going to fucking hang yourself, but go ahead. We'll watch, right? And the fascinating thing about it is once the Truman Show movie came out with Ed Harris and Jim Carrey, you actually had these spectators outside of his little geodesic dome that were watching and enjoying his bad decisions. And it's almost that feeling. You know, Being John Malkovich had a really complex version of that same thing. I believe Woody Allen had one as well, right? But I want you to be aware of that voice, because the other thing is that after you do it, your mind will also say, wasn't that foolish? Don't you feel silly having done that? Now, sadly, I believe that a lot of vaccinations today, medicines and poisons, are able to short-circuit the various neurons in your brain. I'm not quite sure how it works, although I have seen a presentation once by a military organization that was absolutely fucking balls out trying to destroy this in mankind. But to create these functional robots that don't care. You know, you see these videos online all the time, depending on what kind of videos you watch, where, you know, someone dies in a car accident, or they're walking across the street and they get nailed by a car. They're not looking both ways. Typically in third world countries, they don't seem to fucking teach you to look both ways before crossing the street. But there's always someone that's about 10 feet away, walking about 1 mile an hour. Yeah, they're reading their phone, they're fucking around, whatever. Or they're sitting at the bus stop watching. Boom, a body, you know, vaporizes. And there isn't a single goddamn response out of these people. They don't seem to make a phone call to call 911 or whatever it is in their area. They don't seem to rush to see if the person survived. They don't even gasp. They go, oh my God, it was the worst thing I'd ever seen in my life. They're just fucking robots. It's weird. So if you're not one of those people, then you are perfectly qualified to do this analysis on that inner voice. Now, I've said on the policies of the universe, and a few other episodes about the universe, that this is a program, right? The universe is a program, and it's running perfectly every second of every day, right? Palm tree I'm staring at right now never turns into a dinosaur or a telephone pole or a TV. It stays a palm tree, and it's following all the rules of a bush that grows straight up and is called a tree. You know, it doesn't vacillate. I don't vacillate. For half the show, I'm not in Paris, and then I come back to this patio. It's following beautiful rules. The reason why I mention this is what if the very substrate of existence is perfect? Because it can't be anything other than perfect. And your soul is made of that perfectness. Because what else could it be made out of? If your soul, which is a little subroutine inside the master program of the universe, somehow had bugs in it, we wouldn't exist, probably. It probably wouldn't hang on to your body. Predicated on the idea that it exists. Why does telling a lie always make you feel like shit? And telling the truth, oh God, what a relief. You know, sitcoms. Sitcoms have one basic formula. If you want to be a writer for a sitcom, here's the secret sauce that they never fucking teach you in sitcom class. In the first 5 minutes, an incident occurs, and the information that reveals that incident is hidden. And then it takes approximately 15 minutes to reveal, totaling 20 minutes, the problem. And then the last 5 minutes, you have everyone reconcile the mystery. You know, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Will Smith breaks a vase that is an heirloom to the family. It's worth $50,000. And obviously he's in trouble, so he hides all the pieces and parts. And then we go 15 minutes where everyone's looking for the vase, and a bunch of lies, funny lies have been told to manifest up the mystery, to make it even more outrageous and more crazy. And in the end, he just says, I'm sorry, Aunt Veru, whatever her fucking name was, I broke the vase. And she just says, well, why didn't you just tell me? Shit happens, man. I'll forgive you. Oh my God, I feel so much better. And the moral of the story is don't lie. And we as the viewer pay for the experience while watching commercials during these shows because we love the tension and release formula, right? That theme music comes on, oh man, that's a warm, fuzzy thing. Could be Cheers, could be MASH, could be whatever the hell you watch on TV. Then the concealment is tension, tension, tension for 15 minutes. That's as long as we want to actually feel the tension. We don't want to feel it longer than that in a sitcom when it's supposed to be funny. And we're getting little capsules of jokes along the way. In the end, oh man, they wrapped it up beautifully. I'm watching Cheers right now with a buddy of mine. We're dissecting the hell out of the show. And it's one of the most masterfully written shows out there. Crazy how beautiful this thing is. But that's our life. In one way, that's the way our life goes. You know people that are shit starters. A lot of times it's because their life is so mundane that truth becomes a neutral feeling. It doesn't feel positive. It feels neutral. So let's go shit start, they say. Let's lie about something happening. Let's be the devil in needful things and just start shit and just watch the fucking place burn, right? Here's what's interesting. Let's take this back into a metaphor that is typically associated with souls. And that is a religious construct, right? What does religion do? I'll probably do an entire episode on this. Religion says, sorry, almost like a car wreck out there. Religion says that God has chosen the most vile fucking humans on planet Earth, white male pedophiles, to be the proxy between you and God, if you're Christian. And if you don't follow their rules, you're going to go to hell. God's a big asshole, by the way, in this format. But if you, I guess, bend over the altar enough, they'll give you a little bit of salvation and you'll get to heaven. All right. But now, what if you were a symbiotic creature? Your true being, which is your soul, can't be imperfect. It can't, because it is part of the universe. And the only relative deeds that you've ever done that are positive or negative are based on the relative rules of this particular existence that you are punching into, which is humanity. So, right, you die. Your body dies. Well, one, your body doesn't have any command over your soul at all. Except that if you keep your temple clean, meaning, your brain's working well, you're not, sucking down too many chemtrails, not taking too many vaccinations, you're not eating too much toxic food, you're mercury-filled tuna, you have a great connection to your spiritual being. You're still that being. But you can live in an impaired world. You could be in a car accident and your brain gets injured. And so for the remainder of this life, you may or may not recover from the injury, right? But if the second that you die, the only thing that is left is your pure soul, which can't have any flaws in it, otherwise it would cease to exist, what judgment would be left, right? What judgment would be left on your soul Well, your soul hasn't done anything wrong. Your soul has been sitting there the entire time. You know it for a goddamn fact. I guarantee it. It's been telling you what to do right. It has been there to advise you here and there. It asks rhetorical questions. Why did you do that? You knew that was stupid. You know, a lot of times us, those of us who were young and had lots of relationships, especially the more you try to make them serious, invariably someone will hurt your feelings. Whether they meant to or not, whether they're being devious or not, doesn't matter. It's definitely not what we wanted to hear. It's definitely not what we wanted to experience. And maybe we said something back. Maybe we did something. Maybe we broke something or something like that. Second you do it, maybe even the milliseconds before you do it, you're about to do something totally stupid. But you do it because in your body is the child. Your body's young. And it's being chemically structured to match sort of the overall intent and wisdom of your soul. But it takes a while sometimes. And perhaps it is even a genetic bell curve, Perhaps if your family's lived a fairly privileged life and they've been able to, increase the neural density of a brain, and then they spawn, and then your brain as a child comes in more dense, then you have a few more circuits to process, and you still go through the same phases, but you go through them way faster than someone who has lived in a family that has been repressed from education, from maturity, from whatever the situation is, and they come in with a brain that is not quite as dense. This stuff about genetic code is very provable. And what's interesting about the whole bell curve thing, there was a guy that came out, I think it was late 80s, early 90s, and he was talking about the bell curve of intelligence. And he said there definitely is a bell curve of intelligence, and it is related to, he made the mistake of saying race. And that's not really that true. What he needed to say was, it is related to repression and oppression. And it just so happens that you can overlay in some areas of the world where various races, due to racism, have been repressed. But what's interesting about it is, and this is going to be just an arbitrary example that doesn't have any scientific backing. It's not true necessarily, but I'm just going to give you an example. Let's just say there's a tribe somewhere. It doesn't matter what color they are, but they live a beautiful, rewarding life in a rainforest, in a desert. They know how to turn the soil to create crops. They know how to hunt the animals to eat. They know how to protect themselves. They are happy. They're not unhappy. Maybe they suffer more slings and arrows of famine and, monsoons and that kind of stuff because they don't know how to shelter themselves against as much as perhaps the rest of the modern world. But in that particular group of people, it might be that they don't have terribly dense neural nets in their brains because they simply don't need it. Doesn't mean they're stupid. Doesn't mean they're unhappy. Especially doesn't mean they're unhappy. I would assume that a lot of these folks are way fucking happier than us in this, I got a 60-inch television world. But if you live in the dog-eat-dog world of the first world, or if you live in some heavily repressed, although very stressed out world of, the manufacturing community of India, the manufacturing community of China, you are developing these really intense brains, but it's all under, sort of duress. But that can still create an amazing human being that then goes, I figured out how to escape. Boom, I'm out of here, right? These are the sort of the basis facts, the basic facts, I should probably say, where arbitrary migration doesn't make any sense at all. You cannot take Neanderthals from one part of the world and say, oh, look at their big brows and look at their hairy backs. Let's just move the Yetis into, downtown Manhattan and we'll just teach them how to go to the opera. When certain factions follow, codes of law that are 2,000 to 3,000 years in the past, and they're militant and they're violent, and they teach, they teach their people that anyone different than them should die. Well, what do? How can you blend the two together, right? But once we create a world where people live in a beautiful, simple, happy world, and I mean, these tribes are the people that used to be atomistic. I'm willing to believe there's plenty of atomistic tribes that still exist, where they believe the spiritual realm and the physical realm are the same thing. What we can't prove are some of the tales that we've heard from spiritual men in each one of these regions of the world, where you had, again, Native American shaman, some people say shaman. They said they saw the spirits. They said they actually offer services where they can actually tell the spirits what to do. And, sometimes it's fairly immature concepts that, I don't know, may or may not be true, but I used to have an employee who was a Native American, and I was, again, writing this movie. I was, I guess, finishing it when I first met him. And he graduated from Stanford in mathematics, so he was not an idiot. But I said, maybe you can help me get some of the research that I've not been able to get out of the books out of Stanford about Native American, spiritual beliefs that are sort of shrouded. And he said, I could maybe take you half a dozen times to the reservation that I go to, and after they trust you, they might start revealing things. But he goes, I can just tell you right away what they believe. And he said that one of the weirdest practices that we practice as Native Americans in the tribe that he belonged to, which I can't remember what tribe it was, he said that we hire shamans to take spirits that did not leave this realm due to their level of evil and sort of being unfulfilled. You can't leave until you're fulfilled. That's sort of the Native American belief, which is great. But he said you keep reincarnating until you're there, or you're just a stranded soul. But they, I guess, can try and attach these souls to people and create disorder in their lives, maybe even death and disease and accidents and all that kind of stuff. And your Satan worshipers believe a very similar thing with their principalities run by their leaders, But now some people might say, well, dude, you're just making shit up because you can't understand how to interpret all of the emotions that you're going through, all the senses that you're going through. Maybe. But here's the thing. I would say that just like most dissenting comments, there are two types of dissenting comments in the world. There are your pop science people and those who are memorizers and repeaters. They tend to knee-jerk dissent, meaning they haven't personally thought about the concept that you're mentioning more than the moment that you mentioned it. But because it hurts to think, and they don't think that often, perhaps they have they've got a block between their processor and their ears, or whatever the case might be. They can't think. And so for them, they understand the dilemma that you've brought up. Perhaps it even concerns them, and they need that dilemma to go away. And so they knee-jerk, sort of like just swatting away a bee that's flying around their face. If they just relax, the bee will fly off. But you have to have some thought process to realize the bee doesn't want to do anything with you besides smell you to see if you've got pollen on you. And the second he realizes that you're of no benefit to his world, he flies off, goes and finds a flower. I have put a tremendous amount of analysis into this for multiple years, and I honestly will tell you, I don't know when I started. I spent a couple years, probably about 2013 and 2014, really studying sleep deprivation, because, again, I'd read this book that it told me that a lot of the experiments in sleep deprivation have discovered that the longer that you stay up, eventually your left brain goes to sleep, your logical brain goes to sleep, and your right brain wakes up. And that's why a lot of creative people work at night, because there's this natural cycle that your left brain is so fucking anal that it just follows the schedule. It goes, oop, it's 10 o'clock, we must go to bed. And your right brain goes, yeah, whatever, dude. Enjoy, I'll be out front here playing on the computer, painting on a canvas, whatever. When you play with sleep deprivation, it's very interesting. Because a lot of your anal paradigms that you've hung on to is, the stuff that you have to manifest as a child to know where you are in the universe, right? The scariest thing, if you're a parent, the scariest thing is the infection of your child's mind. And I will say that this is just a layman's interpretation of the information that I've got out of Stanford about this whole thing, where they studied children's brains. And some of my friends had their kids in this stuff before I had a child of my own. The first 5 years are, I don't know, it would seem 4 times more important than the next 5 years. And the next 5 years, for between 5 and 10, are also infinitely important. Around 12, your kid starts to get to that that genetic rite of passage where they need to start making decisions on their own. I was an early bird in that cycle. You know, my cultural, sort of pop culture influence as a kid, as far as I can tell, looking back, I spent a tremendous amount of time by myself because I was an only child, and I got moved around so much that any friends that I made were very short-lived, you know. Every once in a while I got to live in my hometown, and eventually finished in my hometown, but maybe Tom and Jerry, maybe the Jeffersons, maybe Good Times, you know, some good, wholesome television shows which were not trying to push immorality. Always a moral uptick at the end of the show. So by the time the world started getting dark here and there, I already had my feet on the ground. And I realized what I wanted to be and what I wanted to live by. And that super duper helped my development, I believe, personally. But now imagine the kids today. I look at Facebook feeds all the time. One of the sickest things I see, because people don't usually take too many pictures of their kids watching television. But it does happen every once in a while. But can you imagine anything on television you let your kids watch today? I can't. But the worst thing is seeing a child hold a telephone, an iPad, a tablet, and thinking of how they could bump into anything on the internet that's out there, right? Or play a little game or something. Now, obviously, not everything is evil and not all parents are bad. So a lot of folks are doing this, and they are, you know, policing their kids from bad content. I think we may even be having a, you know, Renaissance 2.0 for the old value systems, right? But I by no means believe that it's the majority of society that's doing that. I think the majority of society is raising a bunch of cable guys. There's the TV. Will you leave mommy and daddy alone? Okay, well then, victory. And then when the kid gets all fucked up, starts becoming a little bastard teenager, now the parents are blaming the child. Why the hell can't you be a good child? Even if they don't say it to the child, children are empathic to their parents, right? That's why I think lying to a child is probably one of the most fruitless things on planet Earth. I can't say I have any experiences of a child reading. Well, actually, sorry. I actually will give you a very vivid experience of when my daughter did this. But, you know, when you lie to your kids about all the fictitious things like Santa Claus and Tooth Fairy and all that kind of stuff, you might be doing them a lot of harm because they're looking at you going, why are you lying to me? And they feel it deep down inside because their soul is connected to your soul because you have some sort of union, which is why you gave birth to them in the first place or helped conceive of them. Could be just simply tuning to them because they happen to live with you since the moment they're born. Very few times in my life that I ever get access to my daughter, and because I had shared custody and very amicable situation. But I had to drop her off one time with a buddy of mine who was living with his girlfriend at the time. I'm not sure they were engaged. Maybe they were. And there was this weird tension between my buddy and his girlfriend. Now, the good news is, I'll tell you the Paul Harvey ahead of time. They're married to this day. They have 2 children, and they're very, very happy. But I think, without trying to create some sort of feel-good story here, I think that my kid did something that actually made them bond way more at a time when they needed that extra oomph to get over this communication barrier they had. Because I was on one side hearing the guy's side of the story, and I could kind of see the other side. And I had some friends who knew her on the backside, and I was very good friends with both of them, but, you know, I don't sit around talking to her about their relationship. But there was a moment when they were sort of, it looked like they're about to break up. And no one really had any opinions about either one of them. We didn't say that I don't think anyone felt that they should be together or should be apart. We just didn't have opinions about that kind of thing. We sort of felt like it wasn't our business, right? But my kid was over there hanging out in their environment, and it was awkward. They were sort of awkward to be with because you could tell that there was some communication that needed to happen. Neither one of them were big communicators at the time. But there was a point where they were trying to get my kid to do something, or maybe discipline her or something. I can't remember. But they made her mad. She's about, 6 or 7 years old. And my kid pulls out of thin air. And she got me in trouble. This was crazy. She pulls out of thin air. She goes, "He doesn't love you and you don't love him and your guys are going to break up." And she storms off. And then my buddy contacts me like within the day, and he goes, "So what have you been saying about us?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And he goes, "Well, you must have said something in front of your daughter." I'm like, "Okay, I'm lost, man. Tell me what you're talking about." He said, "Well, your daughter said this, and there's no way in hell a little child could have said that without being programmed by an adult." And to his point, I would have thought the same exact thing. But I turned to my girlfriend when he was telling me this, and I said, "Do you remember saying anything disparaging about the two of them?" And I didn't say anything concerning until the night before their wedding. Because when he said why he wanted to marry her, it was all clinical. It wasn't love. It was she's domesticated. That's all he could come up with. And what it really turned out to be was that he was a loving guy, and he just, it's his first relationship really, and it was disorienting for him to commit to a marriage. Just like anybody, he had a little bit of cold feet, but he didn't really have any cold feet at all. He just acted weird around us, and the three guys that were his friends, I'm one of the three of us hive-minded up this thing of like, is he doing the right thing? Because he seems really strange, right? I mean, it seems like it's missing any of the Hollywood versions of love that we're accustomed to seeing prior to a successful marriage. And the beautiful thing is he didn't have that Hollywood bullshit, and he made it work, which is kind of neat. And again, they're happy as could be. They have great kids. It's awesome. But now here's the thing. I know I didn't program my kid. Something resonated between the two of them. My kid felt it and said it. And what ended up happening was she immediately started crying, the girlfriend. Because her greatest fear was exactly what my daughter had said. And the upshot was I picked up my kid, and again, he didn't tell me anything right when I picked her up. He told me a day later, within 24 hours, and they ended up that night sitting down and communicating for the first goddamn time in the way that they needed to communicate. He was able to dispel her worst fears, his girlfriend's worst fears. And I think, looking back, it was one of the most healthy things that ever happened to them. Someone called their fucking bluff. And it was a 7-year-old kid. 6 or 7. She was really young. I think that has to do with sort of a connection on the soul level. My kid was not indoctrinated with a bunch of crap as a child. I constantly taught her science. I taught her philosophy. I taught her everything so that she would have the basics to then go off and become whatever she wanted to be. We feel like we have best friends. We feel like we have quote-unquote soulmates. I think that's an over-optimistic characterization of another person, given that we only meet a couple people. What do we meet in terms of sheer numbers of people that we would consider living the rest of our lives with? I really doubt that most people have met even 20 people that they're like, "I want to marry you," right? It's very few people that we actually cross that line with, and we think, yeah, let's do it. Now, you may consider every partner a partner to marry until they do something where you're like, I guess that's not going to work out, but I love them to death anyway. We won't go the whole distance, but we'll hang out for as long as this lasts, right? But I think we're all connected. And I think that when you meet someone that you've never met before and you feel like you've known them for your whole life, there might be some proximity on the other side that you've perhaps spent life together at a different time. You've been friends before. Hell, maybe you've been brothers and sisters, mother, father. Maybe you've been spouses before. It just happens. There's nothing about a bag of chemicals in a skull that's ever going to make that really explain itself. Someone might try to feed you a bunch of bullshit of like, oh, you know, your neural patterns must be very similar, and therefore you sort of can finish each other's sentences because you just happen to be coincidental identical with the trillions of cells you got in your brain. You just happen to have the same configurations or enough compatibility in your brain that it just works out. Maybe. But again, if you become aware of the way that you feel things and how you feel them and where you feel them, you know, intuition will be a whole different bag of beans, man. Your gut feeling. I guarantee you, every single person hearing me right now, you have compromised your gut feeling before, right? And what happens? A little word called regret starts to enter your life. And again, regret, defined by me, is something that you are regretful for that you can never change. You can never undo it. It is a moment lost in time. It doesn't have to be something cataclysmic, but it can just be, God, you know, why did I do that? And it's usually that moment when you go against your gut and, you know, you had a good partner that could have been your husband or wife or whatever, and you cheated. Or they weren't even, you're not even cheating, it's just you had a choice, and you went down a road of lust that you knew was with a shallow person, but boy, they gave you that physical reward that you were looking for. And we all know that physical rewards are very short-lived. And just an analogy before I close this off, a lot of people struggle with their diet. They get heavy. They eat too much sugar, too much fat or something. Study this the next time you eat your favorite candy or something, right? You're eating it, and as long as your mouth is chewing it up, especially this goes really well with sweet things, right? You're chewing it up, and you're getting this incredible, you know, almost sexual response from this churning food in your mouth. Boom, boom, boom. Oh my gosh, it's just the best thing you've ever had. But then you swallow it, and you take a swig of something, especially water. Water's the best one to do this with. Sushi is very much like this for me. I eat sushi and I love it, but the second I drink water after, it's as if I have never had any sushi besides the horrible breath I've got for a few hours, right? But even if I eat the favorite candy or something and I wash it down with water, it is as if I have never eaten it, and the high is gone. And the reason why I've been able to tame my sweet tooth is I remember the depression, the teeny tiny micro depression that happens the second that I take the swig of water and it's completely gone. I think, this isn't worth it. That little tiny high is not worth me looking in the mirror the next day and carrying around the penalty of that tiny little moment of happiness that sugar can do to the neurons in your brain. All right, sugar and cocaine have the same goddamn addiction in your brain. So does caffeine, right? Now, some caffeine is based on a lot of sugar, and some caffeine can come in a coffee cup, and you're okay. So hopefully this was useful for beginning the lifelong course of discerning the difference between your body, your soul, and your mind. Feel the difference, because you can, and you always have. You may just not have recognized it. You may have not had someone like myself just call it out and say, that's different, right? Right? And again, I did this little experiment a few episodes back about blocking the eye contact with someone. That's a real good example of your soul. Sit with someone. In fact, you know, the other difference is Skype with someone that you really dig and get a perfect connection on the internet, perfect monitor, Skype with them, and see how that feels. And then sit down with them on a sofa, look them right in the face, and tell me that isn't a shit ton better. And what's really happening? If they're sitting across from you, they're not necessarily touching you. You don't necessarily feel the warmth off their body, but them being in the room with you, your soul proximity is all the difference in the world. And once you're sitting right in front of them, reach up and put your hand up there and block out the eye socket without sunglasses on, and realize how much of your spiritual connection disappears and then pull your hand back and go, wow, there really is a soul. Hope you feel me. DeepThoughtsRadio.com for all the feeds. There's a locked Facebook group. You're more than welcome to join. Again, your Facebook profile has to have a little bit of history before I let you in. That's the only thing. Every post is moderated. 99.9% goes through. Repetition will be filtered out if you're posting someone else's thing, because both of you are racing to say that some celebrity died, which we don't do on our site, but you know what I mean. There's video if you are coming in on audio. There's audio if you're coming in on video. Your video sources are YouTube for all videos. However, episode 1, like I said, season 1 is kind of messed up with copyright problems due to the music I used at the intro. If you want to see all that unimpeded, go to vid.me. Instead of .com, you type .me, vid.me. On podcasts, there's iTunes and Google Play. If you do iTunes, we could use a few more reviews in there. Anyway, I really appreciate you guys. The comments have just, I swear to God, the subscriptions go up really, really slow, and believe me, that's good for us. We don't want to be on Joe Rogan's show and get 20,000 new subscribers and then have to deal with 80% of them bitching and moaning because we happen to think for ourselves, right? So it's good that we have a nice qualified group of audience members. They come and they go, so don't worry if the subscriptions go down in a particular week. Sometimes I'll lose 5 subscribers, and then I get these messages from folks, oh my God, what's going on? You should do a video on this to get them back. It's like, hey, it's all right. Either they didn't realize it was a variety show, because I forget to mention that every once in a while, or it's just not for them, and that's totally fine. But everyone's been really great, so thank you so much. Take care of yourself and someone else, and I will see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over now.